Hi everyone, today I've got a really special tutorial to show you. This just happens to be the sweetest Dalmatian that ever lived, and I'm going to show you how I painted her. Her name was Chelsea, and she was a member of our family for 12 years. Sadly, she passed away in 2013. It was my youngest son's birthday a few days ago, and his girlfriend asked me if I could paint her for him. And of course I said yes. So when I painted her, I didn't use any black paint. So I'll show you how I did that and lots of other stuff. Okay, so here's the reference photo of Chelsea that I'll be using. And the first thing I'm going to do is paint the shadows that I see on her fur. They run down the right side of her face and they take up almost all of her body as well. So I've mixed up some burnt sienna and some ultramarine blue, and I've made my trusty grey that I like to make. And now I'm painting onto damp paper here. You can see my waterline here. And I haven't taken the paint right to the edge of the waterline. I've kept it within that waterline there just to make my edges soft. So what I'm doing is just painting onto the damp paper, and I'm just painting in that shadow that I see on the right side of her face. I've also dropped in some Winsor violet onto the grey paint while it was still damp, just to create some interest in the grey. This is what I'm doing at the moment. So this is just a bit of Winsor violet. So I've dried that off now with my hairdryer, and now I want to paint the body. So I've wet the whole body with water, and now I'm using my larger brush. This is the Casaneo brush, and I'm just starting to paint this shadow on her body. So I'm painting on the damp paper just to keep all the paint edges soft. And now I'm dropping in some of the Winsor violet onto that damp grey paint. And I mustn't forget this area up here on her neck, just above her collar as well. I can paint this in on dry paper though. There's also a section on her ear that I can see that's in shadow. And now I'm just softening this edge up here with the damp brush. There's also a little spot on the top of her head that's also in shadow. And I can soften the edge of that with my damp brush as well. So I just want to start painting in the eyes now. I'm just making sure that my drawing's correct before I start to put the paint on. So this is some watery burnt sienna that I'm painting on with my Maestro brush. And I'm just painting it onto the area around the pupil. And then before this dries, I'm going to drop in some Winsor lemon just to blend with the burnt sienna paint. So this is the Winsor lemon that I'm just dropping onto the damp paint. And now I've painted the other eye in the burnt sienna as well, and I'm dropping the Winsor lemon in there as well. Now I've dried the eyes off, and now what I want to do is just deepen the outer edge of the iris. So I'm just wetting it with some water, and then I'm going to run some burnt sienna around the edge. And I'm hoping that the water on the paper will just let that burnt sienna bleed up into the eye. The paper seems to be a bit dry, so I've just put some more water on my brush and I'm just softening the edge of that paint. The paper just wasn't quite as wet as I thought it was. I've just switched to my liner brush now, and I'm running some sepia around the outer edge. I just want to deepen the colour on the outer ring of the eye. So this is just sepia. Now I want to do the same thing on this eye. So I'll just put a bit more water this time because I don't think I had quite enough on the other eye. And now I've got some burnt sienna again. And the water on the paper just lets that paint bleed across the surface of the eye. And then I switch to my liner brush again, and the sepia this time. So the colour's a lot darker this time. I dried the eye off with my hairdryer, and now I want to just paint another layer of the watery burnt sienna over the top, just to deepen the overall colour of the eye. So I just paint this on dry paper. And I'll do the same thing on this other eye. So everything's dry now, and I'm just using my liner brush and some Payne's grey just to paint the pupil in. I'll do this on dry paper. And I'll do the same thing on the other eye. Okay, so everything's dry again. Now I'm painting some sepia on the top half of the eye, just on dry paper. And then I take my damp brush and I just soften the edge of the paint with it. So you want to try and do this as quickly as you can before the paint dries. So I've just done the same thing on this other side with the liner brush, and now I'm using my maestro brush just to soften the edge of the paint. And my maestro brush is just damp with a small amount of water. So now I'm using the grey colour that I mixed up at the start, which was burnt sienna mixed with ultramarine blue. And I'm just painting it in the corner of the eye and underneath the eye, just on dry paper. Now I'm just using my liner brush and some Payne's grey, and I'm just painting the darker areas on the eye. And I've done the same thing on this other eye, and I'm just painting in some eyelashes above her eye now, just with the Payne's grey and just on dry paper. Okay, so here I've got some alizarin crimson, some phthalo blue and some Winsor green, and I'm going to mix the three colours together to make a black. So these three colours will make a velvety black, and I can adjust the colour with either the red or the blue or the green to make it cool or warm, just depending on what I want. So if I want it warmer in colour, I just add more of the alizarin crimson. But if I want it cooler, I'll add, either the blue or the green to it. And I just keep mixing it until I get a colour that I'm fairly happy with. I'll just test it on a piece of scrap watercolour paper before I use it, just to make sure that it's the colour that I want. I'm just going to start with the spots that are around her eye, and I'm just using my maestro brush at the moment to paint some water onto the paper. And then I can use the black that I've just mixed up, and I can start to paint the spots with that. So I work my way around the eye and also down further. So when this is dry, I can come back and layer over the top with another layer of the black paint just to darken it. So I'll just speed this section up so you can see what I'm doing. So I wet the spots first with some water. That helps to keep all my paint edges soft. And the paint goes on a lot easier when the paper is damp. I'm sort of making my edges of the spots just slightly jagged. They're not hard line edges. The smaller spots I don't need to wet before I paint them. I can just paint them straight onto the dry paper. So here I'm going to wet my brush now, and I'm just going to let the spots bleed into one another just to create a soft edge there. I've just dampened the area around her nose, and I mixed up some burnt sienna with some permanent rose, and I'm just painting that onto the damp paper now, just to create that pink tinge that's around her nose and on her lips. Here I'm dropping some sepia onto the damp black spot, and I've gone ahead and I've painted some smaller spots up on the top of her head, and I've painted her ear in here just on the damp paper with a light mix of the black. And now I'm coming back over the top once it was dry, and I'm just darkening the colour in places. So I've mixed more paint into my mix to make it darker. So I'm working on dry paper here. This ear over here I painted in sections because it's got folds and creases in it. So I'm painting the middle section at the moment. Now I've painted in the other section, and I'm just deepening the colour. So this is the final section here that I'm just painting onto the damp paper. I dried everything off with the hairdryer, and now I'm painting a shadow under her ear. This is burnt sienna. I'm painting on damp paper here, so I've wet the paper with just a small amount of water. And now I've got some Winsor violet that I'm just painting over the top of the burnt sienna. Now I'm painting a darker area over the top of this spot here. So I've just mixed up some more of that paint, but I've put more paint in it and less water. And I'm just deepening this section. A few more spots over here on dry paper. And now I'll paint her nose in. Now I've wet her nose with some water, and I'm just patting on some Winsor violet at the moment. So now I've got the black that I mixed up. It's not too dark. I don't want to come too dark too quickly with this nose. So I'm just painting that onto the damp paper. And now I've got a darker mix of the paint. And I'm just deepening just the right side of the nose. So all of this was done on damp paper. Just working the lighter colour down further. And then I dried it off, and now I'm painting the nostrils in with the dark mix again. So this time I'm working on dry paper. Just wetting this area here with some water. And now I've got some of the dark mix again. I don't want any hard edges down here, so that's why I put the water on the paper. Then I can come in with my liner brush and just add some detail. Just a bit of water, and and then a bit more of the dark paint. As it dries, I've got to keep layering the paint over the top because it never dries quite as dark as I'd hoped it would. So I've wet this area under her nose. I put a light layer of the black mix on, and then I put some darker colour over the top. And now I'm using the grey mix that I used at the very start of the painting. It's time to draw in some of the spots on her body now. And then I can start to paint them. So I wet them with water first. Give them nice even coverage over the top. And then I take the grey paint and I start to paint the spots on. And the dampness of the paper gives me plenty of time to paint the spots on, and it just keeps the paint slightly transparent so that it's not too dark and flat looking. And then I can drop in some darker paint while it's still damp. So now I just wet the next area with some water, and then I bring some of that black paint on. Just a bit more water now, and then on with the black paint again. And you can see that it's not all one colour. You can see that the paper's still showing through. And you can also see that I've left some of the edges slightly jagged just to represent the hair that's on her body. I'm doing most of this work with my Maestro brush, but occasionally I'll pick up my liner brush and I'll just add some fine lines with the liner brush. So I wet the area with some water, and then I drop on the paint. Not too dark at first, I just darken it gradually. So get the watery mix on first, and then I darken it slightly. And then I use my liner brush to add some fur. Okay, so everything's dry now, and now I'm painting the collar in with some cadmium red. I can just paint this on the dry paper. And then while that paint's still wet, I want to add some shadows on it with some Winsor violet. So on either side of the collar, I just paint that Winsor violet, and then I use my damp brush just to soften the edges where the two colours meet. Now here I'm painting on damp paper. I'm just using just a small amount of Winsor violet, and I'm just deepening the colour on some areas of the shadow. I'm just painting a few more markings here as well. Now I've got a Prismacolor coloured pencil. This is colour called Cloud Blue. It's PC1023. And I'm just drawing in a few highlights into her eye. And I'll also put some of this colour on the tip of her nose. So I just put it on, and then I just give it a quick rub with my finger just to push it down into the paper. Now I've got some Winsor Newton white ink, and I'm just painting on her whiskers. Just using my liner brush right up on its tip. And I can also just give her some longer eyelashes as well. And I'll paint a few stray hairs coming into the black spots. Here I've got some of the grey mix that I mixed up for the shadow, and I'm just painting the whiskers on the other side. And then off comes the tape. And there she is. So all I have to do now is sign my name. I hope you enjoyed watching my beautiful girl come to life on the paper. Please subscribe if you don't want to miss any of my tutorials. And if you'd like to become a patron of mine and have access to monthly full-length voiceover tutorials, there's a link to find out more in the description of this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Hey, Charles. Hey. She enters the water like a lady.